The testimony that Mike gave was what you would like to hear if you think about it. When we looked at the rescue, you also talked about becoming, trying to become more Christ-like. If you remember, Scripture it tells us in John, what does it say? By this shall all men know you're my disciples. What? If you have love one for another. That's why one of our, on our brochures we have that we pass out is you are so loved, or you feel so loved. And so that's when it's important. So anyway, like I said, it's interesting how the majority of us can. We want to have all the others, but you can see some of the ones take it. You'll have some of your larger churches becoming, whether it be Life Church, others that are spreading and going. They all have their purpose. And so if you're rescuing and becoming, basically what that's also saying is we don't see our church becoming a big church because of that nature. This is what we feel God laid on us historically and presently. So that also tells us what we're looking at and what we're trying to do. So anyway, just interesting for you all to see that, and we're all in as the most part, agreement, trying to work together and how that works then. We've been going through David, if you remember, in the last few weeks, we saw how David had his sin with Bathsheba and covered it for a year, but then he's, if you remember, Nathan met him and confronted him, and David confessed, and then God said that he was going to pay for it fourfold. If you remember last week, we saw how he was being paid for it with Ammon's sin and with Absalom and all the different things that took place, and how all that was falling apart. But if you remember, in the middle of it, David also restored his relationship with the Lord. You see that in Psalms 51 that he wrote. You see it in Psalms 32. You see it also in Psalms 55. But he also, in the middle of all this turmoil, especially with Absalom, you find something to help him. Not just the Lord in his personal walk, but he had friends. How important are close friends to help you through difficult times? And so today we're going to see basically 5 groups of friends that really helped him through this difficult time. So think about it. How many of us have had, close friends, and how many of us are close friends? 1 Corinthians 15:33. Bad company does what? Corrupts good morals. Who we're associated with. 2 Timothy 2:22. Remember, Paul is writing and tells Timothy who to flee, but then who to pursue fellowship with, of people of like mind and so on. You have it if you think about it also, you have it in Proverbs 22. If you're around someone who's given to anger, what's going to happen? You're going to pick up their habits, and you're going to be a person of anger. If you also remember in Proverbs 18:24, a man of many friends comes to ruin, but a friend sticketh closer than what? A brother. So think about it. When we look at it, then the question you're thinking about is, am I the close friend I need to be? And who are my close friends? I think so often we take it for granted. When I was in elementary school, I had 3 really, really close friends. Jay and Dell, and then also Gary. The sad part was by the 7th grade, all 3 of them families moved. So when you go into high school, you had no close friends, and that time your immaturity set in, and you go to church, and they were from the arch rival. Each of them went to the arch rival school. You couldn't be close friends with them. Think about it now, it's ridiculous. But anyway, but it's amazing. Think about the close friends. In college, I had close friends. When Gene and I taught school, we had some great ones. We have some today. Really important, but close friends. But am I the friend I need to be? And then looking at it. So let's look at it. The setting is in 2 Samuel 15, starting in 10 to 17. This conspiracy. Remember, Absalom's been setting this revolt up for a long time. And he has, starting in verse 10, he has it all set up. And he has spies throughout the land. When they have, remember he's been doing it for over 2 years, that when the trumpet sounds, everybody in the different cities are going to, 2 Samuel 15:10, when the trumpet sounds, then everybody, the key people in the different cities are going to rise up and say, Absalom is king in Hebrew. So basically they're leading revolt over everyone. So it's all simultaneous. And you'll notice also in 12 that Absalom has as his major consultant, his person that he's confiding in, and the person who's leading the council is the one that David originally had. That's what caused David, remember, to write the psalm, being betrayed by the close friend. This is the one, remember, this is Bathsheba's dad, and he's very intelligent, good, but notice he then now switched and sided with Absalom. And so notice in 13, then the messenger came to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, Rise, let us flee, for otherwise none of us shall escape from Absalom. Go in haste, lest he overtake us quickly and bring down calamity on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword. So notice there's a conspiracy, there's calamity, and notice also the chaos. And David wanted to get out of the city because he doesn't want to cause harm to the city. There's no reason for all this to be killed. So here they are, they're all running and fleeing. It gives you kind of the idea of what's taking place. So you think about it, put yourself in that position. It's also interesting, notice in verse 10, notice the king went out and all the people with him, and they stopped at the last house. Now think about it. You're leaving Jerusalem, you're leaving your palace, you're leaving, and you're going out, in the very last house of Jerusalem, you stop. How much reflection do you think is taking place? What are you leaving? Here you had all of it, God given it to you. Because of sin, you're now leaving. So here you are, you're leaving. Quite a scene, you think about it. So notice then, the question you ask yourself, how many of you feel like your world's falling apart? Anybody? It happens at times. It really does. You can get a phone call, you can lose a job, a lot of things can happen. You feel like your world's falling apart. So notice then who comes on the scene first, and what happens. Notice in 19, you have the king says to Ittai, okay? We've never heard of him before till now. The Gittite. Now what does that mean? Where's he from? So if he's a Gittite, he means he's from what city? Gath. He's a Philistine. When David was over there, this man now fell in love with David, and he's been following him ever since. So look at it then, what he has to say. What David says to him, Why will you also go with us? Return and remain with the king. For you are a foreigner and also an exile. Return to your own place. You came only yesterday, and shall I today make you wander with us? While I go where I will, return and take back your brothers. Mercy and truth be with you. David's basically saying what? Man, there's no need to come with us, wander. I mean, this isn't your fight. Save your own skin, stay there. Don't do it. Notice his answer. Ittai answered the king and said to him, As the Lord lives, notice who does he recognizing as his God? And my lord the king lives, surely wherever my lord the king may be, whether for death or for life, there also your servant will be. How about, would you say that's a true friend?
Yes.
It doesn't matter whether you're a foreigner or you're not a foreigner. He recognizes God as the true God, but he recognizes David. You notice he's followed him from Gath to Jerusalem, been with him these many years. And now that David needs him, hey, I am your servant. If it means death, I'm willing to die with you. I'm going to be with you. So notice then what happens. So think about it. They go on then and they then cross over and they go into the wilderness. It's an interesting question. Would I play it safe and stay? Or would I stick up my neck for a friend when he needs it? How many people have you been around who are really good and buddy until all of a sudden that person's down and everybody throws them under the bus? It's amazing. So think about it. Here you have a person. How much of an encouragement do you think that's going to give David? You stop at that last one, you're leaving, and all of a sudden you have a guy saying, hey, I won't desert you. I'm here even to death. So that's the first group, the first person you have. Notice the second one is interesting. Starts in verse 24. You have two men named. And again, I'm not good at pronouncing names, so you all know that. And notice the next two you have, behold, Zadok also came, and all the Levites with him, carrying the ark of the covenant of God. And they sat down with the ark and Abiathar. Remember who he is? You remember when David lied about where he was going and his father, Abiathar's father, and the priests were then killed, and he alone escaped to Jerusalem, and he then stayed with to where David was, and he is a priest, and he then has taken over priestly duties, and David then helped protect him. But think about it, is this a way you can get even with David? Hey, it's been over 20 years ago, but, because of you, what you happened, my father done. Saul shouldn't have done it. He did what he did was wrong. But notice here you have two priests and the Levites and stuff. But notice what's interesting, what David says. Remember, they take the Ark of the Covenant, and they carry it legally, and as they're supposed to be carrying it. and they leave the city. Notice what David now says to them. The king says to him, return the ark of God to the city. If I find favor in the sight of the Lord, then he will bring me back again and show me both it and his habitation. But if he should say thus, I have no delight in you, behold, here I am, let him do to me as seems good to him. The king said to Zadok the priest, are you to return the seer? Are you not a seer? Return to the city in peace, you and your 2 sons. So notice what he wants to do. What's his job? The ark doesn't belong to David, or should it be? It should be in Jerusalem. Their job is not to be with David. Their job is to do the priestly duties that they need to do. So David says, I appreciate it, but you need to do your job and serve the Lord first. Now, they also are going to serve David while they're at Jerusalem. But notice the ark doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the city, or to the Jewish people. It needs to be in Jerusalem. And something could happen to me, and so on. So notice then he sends them back, and notice what their job is going to be in 28. See, I'm going to wait at the fords of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. So they're going to go back to the city, and they're going to do their priestly duties, but they're then going to then send messages to David as to, hey, what Absalom and what's taking place. Now, how risky is that going to be? You're doing your job, but hey, do you think they're going to be being watched? You're going to find later they're watched very, very closely. So here, God's first, but you also can serve your friend too. So I think it's a question we can ask ourselves again. Do I place God first in my life? And then also do whatever I can to help a friend? It's a good question. You know, there's a personal risk anytime you do this. Because what happened to his dad when he helped David? And what could happen to David if he helps him now? So here you have these people. You go down a little bit further and notice what happens then in 30. You have a third person who's going to come on the scene, a third group, if you will. And David goes up to sends to the Mount of Olives, something that's going to happen later with Christ. And he wept as he went. His head was covered, and he walked barefooted. And all the people who were with him each covered his head and went up weeping as they went. That'd be quite a scene, would it not? Here they're all leaving the city. They're barefooted. Sign of mourning. It's not what they want, but they're doing it. And then someone comes up to him in 31 and says that his most trusted advisor has now switched to his son. And obviously, a very wise advisor. So notice what David prays in 31. In 31, O Lord, I pray, make the counsel of Othniel foolishness. He has a prayer. Notice the next verse. And it just so happened. It didn't just so happen. Notice who comes on the scene, the third group, if you will, where God was worshipped at Hushai, the archive, met him with his coat torn and dust on his head. What do you think about that? When this guy comes, does he come up to him and say, hey, David, like Job's friends, you've sinned and you deserve what you're getting? First of all, he comes with coat torn and his dust on his head. It's a sign of mourning. Now, what do you think about it? He noticed he is there just simply to comfort and to be with him. He's not coming there to do anything but be a true friend to help him. So he's come there to help him. But then notice what David says in 33. David said to him, if you pass over with me, then you'll be a burden to him. How many people does David already have to try to look after? So I appreciate the comfort. I appreciate this. But there's something you can do for me that's more. Don't come with me. There's one more I got to look out for. But there is something you can do. Okay, now think about it. If you're that friend, all right, I can go and I can comfort, and I can go and keep my mouth shut, but how many are going to be willing to do what David's not going to ask you to do? Because it's going to be quite sticking your neck out. So David said, notice in 34, but if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I'll be your servant, O king, as I've been your father's servant in times past. So I will now be your servant, and you can thwart the counsel of that for me. So notice the one advisor is going to be telling him one thing, and David's saying, I want you to be what? The other advisor that's going to tell him something else. So you can be the voice, and you can really cause problems. Well, this is exactly what happens. And then notice what he's supposed to do, the chain of command. Notice in 35 and 36, remember the two priests? They have sons. Then what happens is Hittai goes and he tells them, the two priests, they then tell their sons, and their sons then get the word back to David. So whatever Absalom's doing, they have this chain. All of them, notice, are risking their life for David. Okay, so it's exactly in 37, Hushai, David's friend, came and he becomes under Absalom. So when you go on a little bit further, you'll find in chapter 17, then Absalom, after they fled, Absalom now asks for advice. And the first one gives his advice, and then notice in verse 5 of chapter 17, Absalom listens to the first one, and the first one tells him, you need to pursue David hard and overtake him and get him when everything's in chaos. He's just fled the city, everything's in chaos, you need to pursue him as hard as you can and go after him. That's the advice. Notice what he now tells him. Absalom said, now I'll call Hushai the Archite also, and let us hear what he has to say. Hushai came to Absalom. Notice what he says. He said, he's spoken, notice in verse 7. This time his advice he was given to you is not good. And notice then he's going to tell him three things to do. First of all, he's going to tell him, first of all, your dad's a mighty warrior. He's not going to stay with the people. And he has fierce warriors with him, and they're going to be hiding in caves. And when you come out against them, they're going to sabotage and they're going to wipe out whoever's coming after them. And word's going to go out that Absalom had this great defeat. Second of all, he says you need to go and gather everybody in Israel to all come to you. Well, if everybody all over Israel is going to come and form the army, how much time is that giving David? Because all those people from all the different places are going to have to come. In the meantime, David can get himself organized. The third thing he says, hey, you shouldn't have the army leading Absalom. You ought to be the one leading the army. Has Absalom ever been, according to history, ever been one to lead the army? No, so how well is he going to know how to lead the army? Now this appeals to his ego. You need to be in charge to do it. He then notices then what it says, he listens in 14, the counsel of Hushai is better. For the Lord had ordained the thwart the good counsel. Notice then, David prayed. The next scene, it just so happens Hushai come. And then all of a sudden he gives the counsel, and notice then who he believes. This is why basically Aphiel, what happens is he recognizes this is the end. Because he didn't take his advice, he goes and kills himself. So again, you think about it. But what happens is when the word goes out, I want you to think of this. Notice then when the word goes, and notice in 16, now therefore send quickly and tell David, see, do not spend the night in the fords of the wilderness. By all means cross over, lest the king and all the people who are with him be destroyed. So notice the two sons are now going to go tell him. And they tell him a maidservant to go tell them, and they would not be seen. But notice in 18, the lad sees these two men. Okay? So then a woman comes and puts him in a well and covers him. Very similar to what happened with Rahab. How important is that maiden in the story, and how important is the woman for covering? They wouldn't have got word if all these people didn't do their part. How important is it? You think about it. They could have got the word, but they would have been stopped. David would not have crossed the river, and notice then they would have been overtaken. How important is each person in their life and the little parts that we play? Do you think we may meet those two ladies one day? And how important their little parts are. But again, how risky was it for the two sons to try to go tell David? They're being watched. And how critical would it be for the dads to, even if they get caught, could see the death of their sons? So I think about it when you look at it. You think about with this guy here, do I have a friend who simply needs my comfort and understanding? That's why he went there first, wasn't he? He just went there with torn clothes and stuff on his head to comfort him. Well, what happens when your friend now turns around and says, hey, I got something for you to do? And how many of us are going to say, nah, I don't want any part of that. That's too risky. The friend has a real need, and it's a need you can meet, and he's asking you to meet it, so what are you going to do? Are you really going to be that true friend? Or are you going to basically say, no, it's more than I want to do? So here you've had three different groups or individuals that you have. We have a couple more. Go over in chapter 17, then we're in 17, go a little bit further on. He crosses over and he goes into the wilderness. And notice who meets him in 27. Three individuals. Again, I won't be able to pronounce them right. He comes into the wilderness, and notice you have the first one. You have Shobi, and he's an Ammonite. What did David do to the Ammonites here just recently? Remember, he wiped them out. So why would this guy, an Ammonite, help David? Notice the second one that you have is Marchar, and he's from Lodibar. Now, where do we know about Lodibar? There you go. Lodibar means no pasture, and that's where Mephibosheth was at when they found him. He helped him earlier, 20 years earlier. And notice then, here's the individual. Notice the third guy is Barzillai. Now, who's he? If you go to chapter 19, you find out he's 80 years old. Well, why in the world would you be, if you're 80 years old, care anything about the king and everything else? I've done my part. It's time to retire. In chapter 19, he says he's a great man, and David tries to repay him in 19, and he says basically, no, just let me die with my people. I'm doing fine. Notice what these three individuals do. If you're living in a place of no pasture, how valuable are all your commodities? It's not like you're going to live in a very fertile area where you can really produce a lot. Notice what these three individuals do. They were not asked to do it. What do these three individuals volunteer to work together? By the way, different nationalities, recognizing a need, and what do? Notice in 28, they brought beds, basins, pottery, wheat, barley, flour, parched grain, beans, lentils, parched seeds, honey, curds, sheep, and cheese of the herd for David and for the people who are with him to eat. For they said, notice this is why, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. Did they notice then, did they see a need and just volunteer and go do it? They didn't say, do you need it? Because I think what happens a lot of times, we see a need, but when we ask, how many of us are too proud to say, yes, I need it? They see a need, they load it all up, and they bring it to them. And according to 19, this went on for some period of time. So here you think about it. How important are these three people? And how important, by the way, it's interesting in Scripture, are their names recorded. You do it unto the least of these, you do it unto me. Think about what they're doing. I think it's amazing. Do I wait to be asked, or do I see a need and just go fill it? I'll never forget reading a story of an individual who had a friend who's passed away, a family, and anyway, there's a death in the family of a friend of his. And he wanted to help. So he goes to the door, and he rings the doorbell the night before the funeral. And they come to the door, and he says, give me all your shoes. What for? So I can polish them and have them ready for you for the service tomorrow. How many times do is that a need? You want to look your best, hadn't even thought about polishing your shoes, and here he's there to say, I'm going to polish your shoes and I'll have them here for you. So tomorrow when you go, you'll look your best. You have never even thought about it, but I know that's a need you're going to need. How many of us are looking and seeing a need and then saying, hey, I'm going to meet that need? Did each one of them have a job to meet? Each one, whether it's counsel, whether it's just to be with him, whether it's to provide food, each one had a need to meet. And I think it's interesting when you look at it. The last one I want to think about is Joab. It's interesting when you get to Joab, then they have the battle, and Absalom is obviously is defeated, and Joab kills him. And you find that in chapter 18. And then when Absalom's killed, everybody disperses. The leader is killed, they all leave. So word comes back then in chapter 18 and verse 33. And the king is deeply moved. He goes to his chamber and he starts weeping. And thus he says, O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I have died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son? Notice 19. It was told to Joab, behold, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom. And the victory of the day was turned to mourning for all the people, for the people heard it and said, the king is grieved for his son. So the people went by stealth into the city that day, and the people were all humiliated, steal away when they fled in the battle. The king covered his face and cried out with a loud voice, O my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son. Again, you understand the grief, but it was treason. And notice all the people that risked their lives to help David, how they felt. So notice then, here's Joab, and he needs to basically, risk his neck to go confront David. Hey, you need to do something. So notice what he tells him. Verse 5, Joab, remember, is a relative of his, came to the house of the king and said, today you have covered with shame the faces of all your servants, who today have saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters, and the lives of your wives and the lives of your concubines, by loving those who hated you and by hating those who loved you. You have shown today that princes and servants are nothing to you, for I know this day that if Absalom were alive and all of us were dead today, then you would be pleased. Well, that's some straight talk, isn't it? Okay, notice he goes on. Now therefore, arise, go out, speak kindly to your servants, for I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, surely not a man will pass the night with you, and this will be the worse for you than all the evil that has come upon you from your youth until now. You need to be, if you're a king, you need to be a king, and you need to thank the people who have helped you here. Yes, mourning is acceptable, but you do need to keep your perspectives in place. Now, how much does it take for a true friend to confront somebody when he's making a mistake? I think it's important. True friends do, don't they? But, faithful are the wounds of a friend, and that we're told in Proverbs. So notice then David in verse 8, give him credit. He goes out and he does exactly, he sits in the gate, and things start returning to normal. He listened to the advice. How many of us would have told Joab a thing or two? David listened. Let's think about it when we look at this then. These 5 different friends and groups of people, what they've done. Would I play it safe or stick with a friend when he needed me? Remember what did he say? Hey, I'm a foreigner, but even if it's death, buddy, I'm here too. We'll go down together. What about the next one? Do I place God first in my life, but at the same time I can be serving Him, but I also can be helping a friend along at the same time, even at great risk, whether the risk to him or risk to his sons and the people. When you think about the next, do I have a friend who simply needs my comfort? I think we don't need to be a Job friend. How many of you had some of these Job friends? They can always tell you why. You notice he didn't say you got what you deserved. He was there simply to comfort. And then when he was asked to do something, he willingly did it. Now, if Absalom knew he was a plant, what would have happened to him? That was a risk he was willing to take. He needs me, and I can help save David and the nation by doing this. What about do I simply look out and see a need? They need food. They need these things. I've got it. I can go help them. It's one of the things we've had so many times that we've done. Kay's done a great job with it, and others. When we've had funerals, even people who aren't even members of the church, and the church has provided a place for them to have a meal or provided a meal. We see a need, and you go to help them. And it really has spoken well. In fact, we've had people even contact the church for it because of how well the church has done. We can continue to do that, but that's really a great thing of service you can do. And then I think about it, do I have a friend who simply needs my comfort? But then am I willing to change my roles? And the last one we just saw, am I willing to confront a friend when he needs to be confronted? Who is Joab's boss? David. How many of us are willing to go confront a boss when he's wrong? Could David relieve him of his duties? He sure could. But he needed it, and the nation needed it, him to be confronted to make it right, or no telling where it might have gone. So think about today. What type of friend am I, and what type of friend do I want to be?